Good morning.
Good morning.
We are excited this morning to see each other, and that's good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Southminster Steinhauer United Church. We have much to celebrate today. Today marks our 19th anniversary of becoming an affirming congregation within the United Church of Canada. This is a community who welcomes, who affirms, and includes those of every sexuality and every gender and expression. This congregation has worked for these 19 years in including and affirming the LGBTQ2S community in membership, in leadership, in partnership, in allyship, in lots of ships. We celebrate this morning this wonderful reality that we are a place of welcome, of inclusion, of exploration. We celebrate that we're a community of diverse seekers, a place where we can open ourselves to compassion and depth, a place where we continue to work for justice and peace and a better community. Not just for us, but that we can take what we learn here, what we experience here, to our broader community and to our world, to make it better, to make it more just, more inclusive, more affirming. So, all of us here, we're welcome just as we are. We're part of one circle, one community, one world, and we celebrate that and work hard to make that a more clearer reality. Experience this openness this morning. Experience this welcome, however you need it, for you in your lives this morning. Experience that no matter who you are affirmed in your personhood, in your need for connection, and who you are and what you bring to us as a community. As we acknowledge who we are together for this place, for this land, the inheritance from previous generations that we share with our indigenous brothers and sisters, and all who call this land their ancestral and adopted home, we celebrate that too. We find honor in expressing who we are by expressing gratitude and living our commitments to peace and to reconciliation, to compassion and to healing, and to hopeful relationships in the future. This is our hope, but it is also what we try at every step to do in our actions and in our words. May we all know this morning, as we gather here in this place that we so often do, or perhaps that we do for the first time today, may we know that although moving toward love is often difficult and never easy, that we can find friends that can inspire our way. This is a place of belonging.
We come from all that has shaped this week for us, from all that has shaped this morning in our lives. And we're in that space of being between getting here and being here. So we take this moment to draw ourselves into the present gift of being here with one another. And we center our hearts and our spirits and our thoughts as we respond to one another with the words you find before you. We come with our longings to belong. To be ourselves without being isolated. To belong in families given or chosen that accept us. Communities that respect us and believe in us.
We belong to a larger story, to a life that matters and makes a difference.
Each time we gather, we light a candle, placing light in our midst, centering around what is perhaps the most universal religious and spiritual symbol, that most primal gift of light. And as we gather around this light, we know that above us are the stars, beneath us the soil, and within us the light of life. We gather with each other, seeking the light that is within us, between us, beyond us, among us. And we gather to nurture all that gives radiance to the light within us. We gather seeking wisdom in story and song, in silence. We gather in the presence of light, but always in the hunger for more.
Our time for all ages is a time for stories and a time for talking and a time for small people and tall people alike to gather. And I welcome anyone who wants to come to the carpet for a story this morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I want to read you a story, and you are welcome to look at these pictures here in the book or up on the wall. You can see them really big. Today I want to read a story called The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. I've read this one before. It's a fan favorite. But I also want to say something about this book before I read it. There's some creatures in this story that may look a lot different than you and me, but I think this book might be about you and me. So I want you to hear the story of the Sneetches. Now, the star-belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-belly Sneetches would brag, "We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches." With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort, "We'll have nothing to do with the plain-belly sort." And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the star-belly's children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain belly children had none upon theirs. It's not fair, is it? When the star-belly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics or parties or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the plain belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark on the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. Terrible. Then one day, it seems, while the plain-belly Sneetches were moping and doping alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and keen, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean. And I've heard of your troubles. I've heard you're unhappy. But I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you. I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. And he said, "You want stars like star-bellied Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burked, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain-belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties, and now we can go to your Frankfurter parties." "Good grief," groaned the ones who had stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst. But now, how in the world will we know?" they all frowned. "If which kind is what, or the other way round?" Then up came McBean with a very sly wink. And he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who? That's perfectly true, but come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and it will only cost you $10 eaches." "Belly stars are no longer in style," said McBean. "What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off all your stars, so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on theirs." And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then, with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout, "We know who is who. Now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without." Then, of course, those with stars got all frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guessed, things really got into a horrible mess. All the rest of that day on those wild screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machine, they raced about and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money. They kept running through until neither the plain nor the starbellies knew whether this one was that or that one was this, or which one was what one and what one was who. Then when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn. Nope, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars, and whether they had one or not upon theirs. I'm not going to ask you if you have a star on your belly or not, because it's nobody's business. But we are all different. And just because of one little thing doesn't make us better or worse than anybody else. We're all different and we're all unique. Sometimes it's the way we look, sometimes it's the way we think, sometimes it's the actions we do. We're all different and unique, but we all have value. We are all unique and valuable. And so those Sneetches learned an important lesson. It didn't matter if they had stars or not, right? They became friends after that. And just like us, if we can look past the things that are different, we can find the things that are the same. And that means we can have hope that we can be friends with anyone in the world. And that can make a difference. So our goal as people, all who are valuable, is to make friends with people that may be not like us. And if we can do that, we can change the world. I bet you didn't know you had that power, but you do. You can do it, one friend at a time. So thank you for sharing in this wonderful story with me. If you're talking in verse and rhyme the rest of the day, I don't blame you. Today we'll have Kids Spirit, and that's a time for kids from kindergarten up to grade 5 or 6, and you're welcome to follow our leaders through those doors right there, and you'll have a wonderful time this morning. And our youth cafe is also going on this morning. If you're in grade 6 or older, junior, senior high, you're welcome to go to youth cafe downstairs.
Over the last number of years, people from around the world have recorded stories of hope, particularly hope for our youth. Hope in how it gets better. How it gets better for those who see themselves, know themselves, experience themselves to be different in some way. These are stories particularly of folk in the LGBTQ2S communities who have come from all walks of life, adults who have taken the time to share their stories. There are stories from RCMP officers, and there are stories from Barack Obama, and there are stories from other political leaders, and stories from Apple employees. The stories we're going to hear this morning are the stories from Pixar employees, those in the movie industry.
This is a reading that comes from the first book of writings we have in the early first century, from the Gospel of Mark. One of the scribes came near to Jesus and those he was talking to and asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. You shall love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength.' And the second is this, 'You shall love your neighbor as yourself.' There is no other commandment greater than these." In this teaching attributed to the Jesus of Nazareth,
those of you that know me well know that I love questions. But there are also questions I love to hate. Like that thing we call question period. That parliamentary parlance, which is truly a misnomer. What is asked bears little resemblance to a real question, because there's no genuine inquiry. It's a tool to trap or embarrass or score a political point, or at least get yourself in the media. And maybe I know that because as a lawyer, I often pretended to ask questions. One of the first things you learn as a litigator is never to ask the witness a question unless you know the answer. Never open yourself to the possibility of being ambushed by an answer you're not expecting. Asking a question is about strategy. It's not about inquiry. And we all do it. We ask rhetorical questions that imply the answer we want to receive. And we ask hypothetical questions that waste time and energy about things that matter not or will never happen or live only in the world of what if. And we ask questions that are pointless, trying to test someone's love or their loyalty. We ask questions to elicit the answer we want. And if we read the Gospels given to us from some first century communities, we often find Jesus on the answering side of non-inquiring minds. A lot. The four Gospels can read like a game of Trivial Pursuit when his friends come with such important questions as, which of us will be greatest in the next life? Which of us will sit on the right of you and which of us will sit on the left of you? Or his opponents come with really great questions like, is it okay to pick corn on the Sabbath? Or should we pay our taxes? Or, and who's my neighbor? But my all-time favorite is the little scenario that just precedes the exchange of that great commandment we read a moment ago. What comes immediately before it, in Mark's Gospel, are these religious leaders who come to Jesus about a hypothetical woman who marries 7 husbands. And essentially the facts are these. A woman marries 7 times in her lifetime. She marries 7 brothers. 7 times she promises to stick with them until death do us part. 7 times, death does it every time. Death parted them. Each of them made a widow of her, and finally she dies. So the burning question is now, in the next life, nirvana, heaven, paradise, eternity, whatever you want to call it, in the life beyond death, whose wife will she be? I don't know about you, but that's not a question that keeps me awake at night. And it wasn't a question that kept those religious leaders who asked it awake at night either. They were Sadducees. They didn't even believe in an afterlife. They didn't believe in a life to come, a resurrection, a reincarnation, whatever we want to call it. For the Sadducees, there were 2 certainties. You lived and you died. Full stop, period. So it's just a riddle. It was a ridiculous question with an agenda only to trap the teacher and divide the listeners. It was just a setup. But someone either liked his answer, truly, or was enjoying the game of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and so he continued with another question. And that's how we got the so-called golden rule in our tradition, at least the way Mark gives it to us. That great golden rule comes as a response to a follow-up trick question. in the presence of those competing factions in first century Judaism, a religious leader has a second question of Jesus. Now it's not, whose wife will she be? Now it is, if I was only going to keep one commandment, one rule, which one do you think I should keep? And when this scholar challenges Jesus to pick one, instead of picking one, Jesus essentially just sums it all up in one 4-letter word and says, I think you should love. Of all the 613 laws that Jesus and the faithful Jews of his time were to observe, these two he cites as the 2 great commandments don't appear in any of those 16 laws. He didn't choose from the top 10 that we call the commandments. He didn't choose from the more than 600 ancient rules, like the one prohibiting a man from lying with another man, or from eating shellfish, or from wearing 2 different kinds of fabrics. Take off your polyester right now at the door. What he essentially said was, none of the above. None of those 10 commandments, none of those 613 laws. If you were going to live by one rule in your life, it would be this: love without limit. Love the source of life. Love yourself. Get on with it. Love your neighbor. And this scholar who set up the question liked the answer. He told Jesus it was the right answer when he said to love the source of life, to love yourself, and to love everyone is perhaps not so much really a summary of the law that was foundational for first century Judaism, but it really was a revisioning of it. And it seems to me that Jesus was answering an entirely different question than the one that was posed. Really, he was answering the question, and what is the litmus test of our religion? What is the most decisive identifier of our faith tradition? What would be the one thing that would identify me with my religion? And I hear this answer that Mark puts in the mouth of Jesus as a kind of elevator speech, where this radical rabbi rejects all the norms and the taboos of his religious tradition, and he seeks to reform it with one simple essential: love. And if that's the fundamental practice Jesus would identify for Judaism, shouldn't it be the first principle of any tradition we would establish in his name? Isn't love the litmus test for what it means to be one who follows the way of Jesus of Nazareth? And it takes all those questions like, can I be lesbian or gay or transgendered or cisgendered and be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever? Or do I have to believe in God to be a Christian? Or do I have to be baptized? Or do I have to believe in a Trinity? Or do I have to believe in the Bible to be the Word of God? And it makes them all as trivial as, whose wife will she be in the next life? Because the litmus test isn't about what we believe. It isn't about our gender or our gender identity or our sexual orientation. It isn't about how we express intimacy or which spiritual practices we keep, what holy days we observe. The litmus test of any true faith, of any healthy spirituality, the litmus test of being religious or spiritual or humanist is the same. It's love. That's not what the evangelical church that raised me told me. And it's not what the mainline Protestant denomination that ordained me told me. But when I was 29 years old and I came out to a friend who said, Nancy, whenever and however and with whoever we find love, I think the whole world should stand up and cheer. I think that's when I heard the gospel truth. That's when I heard the litmus test for what it is to be alive, for what it is to follow the wisdom of our best prophets and teachers. And that's when it began to get better for me. When I began to love life and love who I was. And that self-acceptance and pride radically changes your capacity to love another person. As a spiritual community who find wisdom in the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, we can't say it gets better unless we're making it better. We have a responsibility for making it better. For those who have come to believe that they are not beautiful, that they are less than whole, that their loving is a distortion or a disorder or a deviance or a sin, certainly not a miracle. For those who are afraid and are without a connection to any soul or their soul, we are the ones who can make it better. Because that's what love is, and that's what love does. It's about being and doing what it takes to make our planet and our country and our community and our families and our spiritual communities safer and braver and kinder and more hopeful for all of us, not just for some of us, for all of us. Just imagine what the Christian tradition could offer to the world if we embraced its core teaching, that which best identifies us. Imagine if that were love. Imagine if what we brought to be best known for in the world was not our theology or our set of prohibitions or our doctrines or our dogmas, but if we were known for how broad and how deep and how wide our love is, and how committed we are to love as our core and central value. This is the 21st century. 21 centuries into this tradition. Surely this is the time to make it so. To compost all those non-essentials we've dreamed up and made up and souped up and imposed in the name of Christianity. And to come back to the litmus test of love. In this silence we spend with one another, it's a time to ask ourselves what love requires of us. Right now where we are in our lives, right now where we are in our history, right now where we are in our culture. What does love require of us.
There are as many ways to love as there are ideas and thoughts and emotions and people in this world. We all find different ways to express that love to our communities and to the people closest to us and the people farthest from us. In how we express our love, we can share how we do it with each other. This is the way love grows. This is the way our ideas and our minds and our hearts open and broaden. In strengthening our intentions and in sharing our thoughts and our minds and hearts with one another, may we speak these words as a way to strengthen ourselves in the act of loving. In caring for one another, may we be untiring. In hearing one another, may we be respectful. In sheltering one another, may we be strong. In holding one another, may we be tender. In forgiving one another, may we be generous. In the expectations we have of one another, may we be realistic. In the songs we sing with one another, may we seek harmony. In the stories we share with one another, may we find wisdom. And in loving one another, may we be unfailing as we seek to live more nearly as we pray. May it be so.
Spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. Ooh, 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 This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Also, next Sunday we have an invitation. We are reviving a conversation circle that we were doing some time back and haven't found our way to in this season with each other. Going Deeper, but Going Deeper is moving to a new time. So an opportunity to come on 4 evenings, starting next Sunday evening at 7 o'clock, and an opportunity to be in a circle of support and care, and to share and reflect on the theme that has been explored in that morning as a place to start. And if your conversation or your sharing takes you someplace else, that's all right too. Joyce Madsen and Claire Woodbury will facilitate those Sunday evenings for us. And if you didn't manage to get here Sunday morning, that's all right. You're still welcome. You'll still find meaningful engagement and conversation. So beginning next Sunday, taking the light that we have shared here to deepen our commitment to love, so that we might truly be known by our love, that it might be that which identifies us as people of faith, people of a deep and genuine spirituality. We go knowing that there's really only one question: how to love this world. We go to do it.
thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch last week's video, click this button right here. If you can manage it and can donate to SSUC to help us continue this video page, click right here. And for any information that you want about SSUC and our programs, visit our website right there.